That sounds great. Okay, well, let me go ahead and introduce myself officially. My name is Amy Bodkin. I am an autistic ADHD adult who also has dyslexia and a connective tissue disease and auditory processing disorder, and I have a whole lot of diagnoses that are supposed to describe some of who I am. I also used to be a school psychologist, and I now work worldwide with families, helping them figure out how do we help our child thrive? What's blocking us from thriving? I also have two autistic ADHD children of my own. One's dyslexic and one is hyperlexic. And I have homeschooled them since they were young, and they are almost at graduation now. So that's a little bit about my background. I tend to come at neurodivergence from three different perspectives. One, as a person who is neurodivergent, two, as a professional, and three, a parent. So today we are going to be talking about strength-based parenting. So as we're starting that conversation, there are two things that I think we really need to address first. The first one is that a lot of times when we think about strength-based parenting, we tend to think, I think, a lot about academics. But we have to remember that our child is not just a brain. They are a whole person. And that whole person contributes to what supports they need, how successful they can be, all of those things. In the United States, we have Abraham Maslow, who created Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a triangle, and there are different levels of needs. So, and there's actually a couple other professionals in the world who have created similar hierarchy of needs. So the most basic one is physical needs. And so that's going to be our basic physical needs. And a lot of times we don't think about looking there when we're looking to use strength-based parenting. And I think what we want to think about when we're thinking about these needs and strength-based parenting is, what do we have to work with? And then what are our needs? And how can we use what we have to work with the needs that we have? So sometimes you'll have a kid where they don't feel very good inside. Both of my kids, actually, both had undiagnosed celiac disease where wheat makes them sick, really sick. And that was part of the reason why they were having as much trouble learning as they were, was because they didn't feel good. Now, you know, when you're in a situation where you've got a need like that, then you've got to think about, well, what do I have to work with? And because my medical system where I am is not very knowledgeable about neurodivergence, I wasn't getting a lot of help from our doctor. So I had to look for other options. And, you know, one of the strengths I have as a parent is that I can get creative. And it's not just about the kids' strengths, it's also about the parents' strengths. So I got creative and I started asking around, and I found a doctor who was much more aware of neurodivergent health. He got me in touch with a lab that could do some testing, and we were able to get them help. Another strength that I have was getting creative with how I could prepare food on a budget. So what would be gluten-free? I could do a lot of rice and bean-based meals, and a lot of things that weren't quite as expensive as some of the more expensive gluten-free foods. So, you know, that's one way that we used some of our strengths to support needs in a physiological sense. When it came to things like potty training, my daughter, who is dyslexic and was allergic to the diapers that we had, except for cotton. She was allergic to all of the others. So I had to potty train her very young when she didn't have a lot of language. And so one of the strengths of hers that I used for this physiological need was the fact that she is highly visual. and she's very good with patterns. So we set up patterns to help her be able to navigate that as independently as possible, even though she didn't have language yet. And there were several different ways that we managed that. But that's another example of about how we can look at what are our strengths, what are our needs, how can we use our strengths to meet our needs, whether the child's strengths or the parent's strengths. We're both using our strengths to try and support those weaknesses. And while we're on that subject, the other thing I really think we need to address is that when using strengths, our goal is not to increase the strength. Our goal is to find balance. So we're using our strengths to support our weaknesses. I like to say often that kids are like cars. Cars, when their tires are well balanced, drive well and they get good gas mileage. When their tires are not well balanced, they don't drive well, it's extremely bumpy, and you get bad gas mileage. So kids are similar. When they have balance in their development, growing and learning is pretty easy. But when things are out of balance, where they have extreme strengths and extreme weaknesses, that's where it's hard. And it's because of the imbalance. So when we're talking about strengths, we want to make sure that we're thinking about using those strengths, not to enhance the strengths to an extreme level, but to use those strengths to build up weaker areas so we find more balance. So we were just talking about physiological needs, and there are a lot of different strengths that we can use. Personally, I mentioned I'm dyslexic, and I have a connective tissue disease. Your entire body is made up of connective tissue, and basically, mine's not made right. So that means it is something that impacts my entire body. And one of the wonderful things about being dyslexic is that a lot of dyslexic people tend to be big picture thinkers. We see it all at once. Some people think, this is a tree, this is a tree, this is a tree, this makes a forest. Most dyslexic people I know tend to think, this is a forest and it is made of trees. It's a different way of thinking. Instead of thinking linearly, we're seeing it all at once. And that has been one of the greatest strengths for me and me health needs, as well as my children, because they also have the same connective tissue disease. Because since I see everything as a big picture all at once, it makes it much easier for me to manage care when multiple systems are involved. People who aren't dyslexic have a lot harder time with this. So it is a real strength of dyslexia. The next level up on Maslow's hierarchy of needs is safety needs. So that's going to be a lot of anxiety, emotional safety, security. And this is something that a lot of neurodivergent kids have trouble with, because when your brain is wired differently, and especially in my case, because people with my connective tissue disease are 640% more likely to be autistic because our brain structures are different. And also our autonomic nervous systems don't work. That's the part of your nervous system that tells your heart to beat when you're not thinking about it. So it's a very important system. So it's also the system that kind of helps with stress response, those kinds of things. The structure in the brain that's different in my brain is that my left amygdala is enlarged. That impacts our emotions. So that impacts fight or flight, how we're feeling, our anxiety levels. So a lot of times for neurodivergent kids, anxiety is part of the package. That's a piece of it. And one of the things that we can use as far as parents go from our own strengths is that as parents, we have fully developed brains. And so we are able to try to prevent our children from being scared, to try and provide them with support so that they know that we are taking care of them and they are okay. That's extremely important because the best way to explain this is that it's kind of like your brain has an on-off switch for fight or flight. So when we get scared or nervous or anxious and we're terrified, we can tell our brain, oh, this isn't a big deal actually. I thought it was, but it's okay. We can dismiss this. Children, it's like they aren't born with this on-off switch and it develops later, which makes sense because if you've got a child that, is being chased by a wild animal, you don't want them to decide to turn off the off switch because they need that anxiety and they don't always have the ability to make those decisions well for themselves. However, it also means that once a child becomes anxious, that fight or flight system tends to stay on. It doesn't really turn off. And so one of the greatest strengths we have as parents is the ability to help our children feel as safe and secure as possible. Because once it gets turned on, it's very difficult to turn off in childhood. That's why children need to be taken care of and protected in those early years. It's because their brains are not ready to take care of them themselves. And creating that safety net and support is so important. We can also use strengths of the child as well. Dyslexic children especially are usually very good at imagining things in their mind. So one of the things that we can do to help them calm their system is to ask them to imagine a place that is calming to them. Like I might imagine myself in the middle of a field, lots of grass, there's flowers, it's kind of like a meadow, and maybe it's a sunny day, but it's got lots of puffy white clouds. The sun is overhead. I can feel the wind blowing through the grasses and blowing my clothes. So, I can picture something very relaxing, but it's also helping me focus on the sensory experiences. And that allows my mind to let go of the things that it's worried about. So that's a real strength that a lot of dyslexic kids have that we can make use of to support their feelings of safety and security. Thinking as a whole person, the next thing we're going to talk about is love and belonging. Because, a lot of times we think we need to start with academics, but to be honest, academics is the last thing in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because you need all these other things to be able to learn well. Strength-based parenting, in a lot of ways, is seeing your child as a whole person and then supporting them in all of those different areas. And also making use of the strengths you both have to make that a reality, to compensate for some of the weaknesses. Love and belonging is the next step. This is how our children develop emotional security. It is also how they learn to understand how they should expect to be treated by other people. It is our relationships with our parents especially that have such a huge impact on how we see ourselves and how we expect others to treat us. One of the things that I talk about often is that the biggest enemy of self-advocacy skills is compliance training, which is interesting because a lot of times in the world, parents emphasize compliance as well as teachers. Teachers often emphasize compliance. The problem is that if we overemphasize compliance, then we are doing damage to kids' ability to self-advocate. They are complete opposites. And a child needs to be able to feel confident and secure enough in themselves that they can protect themselves. Most kids with disability are at a significantly higher risk of abuse, especially sexual abuse. If a person with a disability has been sexually abused, they are likely to have been sexually abused 9 times in their life. And then I think it was something like, I want to say it was 80 or 90%. People with disabilities are 80 to 90% more likely to be sexually abused. And that's just one type of abuse. So we are definitely at significant risk. I just gave a talk this past weekend on suicide and what we can do to prevent it. People with disabilities are 3 or 4 times, or estimated to be 3 or 4 times more likely to commit suicide. And it comes down to lack of supports. And so one of those supports that's really important is having positive relationships that help teach you how you should expect to be treated and what your value is. One of the things we spoke about in that talk was what happens when you have a child who doesn't have someone like that in their life, who loves them and supports them and helps them understand that they have value and that they need to be treated with respect. One of the things we talked about is that when you don't have someone like that in your life, thanks to the internet, we now have options to listen to people who can provide that to us. There's a television show in the United States called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was on when I was a kid. And Mr. Rogers got a letter one day from a girl who watched his show. And she had said that she lived in a very abusive family. But every day she would come home and watch his show because it was on our public television stations. And she believed that he was talking directly to her. So even if it's not a real person in your life, there are other ways that we can connect with other people who can provide that sense of love and belonging and help us develop self-advocacy skills and a sense of value in ourselves. And I think this is extremely important for people with disabilities because we have to feel proud of who we are. And if all we ever hear about who we are is how it's something that's wrong with us, then we're probably not going to feel very good about ourselves. My daughter was in a class where they did it was kind of like a group mixer to get to know each other. So they were supposed to write down 3 things they liked about themselves and put them on the board. So my daughter wrote down autistic, dyslexic, and something else, and I can't remember what it was. But she put those things down because those are things she likes about herself. One of the other kids said, "Who put down autistic and dyslexic?" Because she couldn't understand why she would be proud of that. But one of the things we've spent a lot of time talking about in our home is the benefits of autism and dyslexia. And so she's very proud. And there are a lot of great strengths that go on with autism and dyslexia. It's just we often don't give kids opportunities to really shine with those strengths. Most people, when they start their education, they focus on reading, writing, and math. Those are usually things dyslexics have trouble with. But dyslexics usually have amazing comprehension and memory skills. They may not be able to remember math facts or a poem or things like that, but they are really good at remembering a story. And they are also really good at understanding advanced reading material. They might not be able to read it themselves, but if you read it to them, they do. When my daughter was 9, we read an adult translation of Arabian Nights, and she completely understood it. After reading one of the stories, she says, "Mom, that's why You got to be careful who you marry, because they might end up being a sorcerer who turns your legs to stone and the people of your kingdom to fish. And I was like, well, yes, that's exactly right. But she got the main gist of the story, what the point was. And she was very young at the time. The reading level was probably a 12th grade reading level. It was very high. But she could understand that. Yet, she couldn't read, she couldn't spell, and she couldn't do math. And a lot of dyslexics are like that. So when we grow up, we're in school and we get a lot of negative messages because all of school is focused on the things that we stink at. Whereas hyperlexic kids, my son's hyperlexic, he learned to read at a very early age. It comes with its own strengths and weaknesses. But most hyperlexics grow up feeling really good about themselves because when they're young, everything that they do in school is things they're really good at. Reading, spelling, computation, and math. It's only when they get older that they start to have trouble. But by that point, most of the time, my high schoolers will say, oh, don't worry about it. I'll be great at it. And it's because they're hyperlexic, and in their early years, they received lots of positives about their abilities in education. And so those relationships that we have with people, how we treat them, it sets the stage for how they expect to be treated and how they see themselves. And that's a very important area to consider. And, you know, not everybody has the same strengths when it comes to relationships. We do things differently. We have different things that we're good at. My children's relationship with me is extremely different from their relationship with their dad. And that's not a bad thing. It takes multiple people and relationships investing in a child to help them truly develop a sense of who am I and how do I expect to be treated? And it sets the stage for learning. The next area in Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-esteem. And what I love about this part is that it comes right after love and belonging, because love and belonging is how we learn to have self-esteem. You can't build up a child's self-esteem. Self-esteem comes from within. It comes from the self. So if we don't have that love and belonging, we don't get self-esteem. It's those relationships that help us learn how to see ourselves, how to develop a positive sense of self. And then we finally get to the top level, which is self-actualization. This is where learning happens. This is where a lot of those strengths that we think about are happening. I've heard parents say before that, well, this kid is my academic kid because they're really good at academics and they're really smart. And this kid over here is my sports kid because they're really good at sports, but they're not very good at academics. And that's really, that can cause some problems. Everybody has abilities in every area. They just might look a little different than what we maybe expect. So I'll use my children as another example again, because I get to watch them up close and personal all the time. So I have lots of great stories on them. My son taught himself to read by the time he turned 2. I didn't teach him. He just picked it up. That's why he's hyperlexic. But my daughter didn't read until 9.5. Okay, so there's a significant difference there. But both of them are good at English and reading and language arts. But they're good at different parts. My son is really good at reading and spelling. He's been out spelling me since he was 5. But my daughter, I told you a minute ago that I read an adult translation of Arabian Nights, and she totally understood it at 9. So her abilities were more in comprehension. It doesn't make one of them good at reading or one of them good at English and the other one bad. It's just we have different strengths within each subject area. Everybody's got something. It just depends on what it is. And oftentimes we have more rigid ideas about what is a good strength and what is a bad strength. In early education, a lot of times there's a lot more value placed on being able to read and spell. It's part of the reason I chose to homeschool my children, actually. Because of the system we have in the United States, I knew that Jessica, if I sent her to public school, she would end up being pulled out all day long to work on her reading, writing, and math, the things that she has a hard time with, and that she would never get to showcase her strengths. She would be pulled out of literature and story times and all these other things to work on those reading, writing, and math skills. But her strengths lay in comprehension. And not being able to read doesn't block you from meeting cognitive needs. Cognitive needs are met through the sharing of ideas. And we can do that orally, we can do that in written form, we can do it through a video, we can do it in so many different ways. The only time you have a hard time meeting a child's cognitive needs is if they don't have the development to comprehend what the idea is. And that's one of the weaknesses, actually, of hyperlexic kids. They have a hard time with memory, which impacts comprehension. So that's a huge strength of dyslexics, but we ignore it most of the time in the early years because we always start, it seems, with reading, writing, and math. Along those lines, we can use strengths of our children's processing to inform how we choose to educate them. So when I was educating my daughter, the choices that I made was to read aloud all of her books to her. Because I knew if I read them aloud, she would be able to understand, and she could still enjoy learning, because it would be letting her do the things that she's good at, and we would be increasing her cognitive processing skills. We continued to work on her ability to read, and it took a while. It took time because her brain had to wire up so that she had the necessary neural pathways to be able to read. She had to develop the ability to rhyme. She had to develop the ability to talk. She had to work on distinguishing letters, being able to remember those letters. There were so many pre-reading skills that she had to work on, and it took longer. But she eventually got it. At 9.5, she started reading in English. And it wasn't anything I did. It was because she had time. Sometimes a strength we might have might be the gift of time. And that was a strength we had because I had flexibility to give her that time to develop those skills that she needed to develop. And I had the ability to also give her the opportunity to continue learning even though she couldn't read yet. Another strength we haven't spoken about is the strength of relationships. I told y'all a little while ago, I have one child that's hyperlexic and one child that's dyslexic. And them learning together has been amazing for the two of them because they have learned so much from each other. My favorite story about my children is when they were little. I think my son was 5 and I think my daughter was 7. And they were snuggled up together and he was reading her a story because she couldn't read it. And then she was narrating back to him what he just read because he had no idea what he had just read. But they were able to each use their strengths to help strengthen the other's weaknesses. And that's another part of that strength-based parenting. How can we contribute the strengths of our whole household to help strengthen the weaker areas of different members in our house. And that can be a beautiful thing, especially when we combine it with conversations about how everybody has a strength in reading. We just do different parts better than others. You know, one's good at comprehension, one's good at the actual decoding process. Those things are extremely important. We can also use visual strengths. Lots of dyslexics have visual strengths to help us learn things. I know when Jessica was little, we used a lot of videos because she could access a video, but she couldn't read to herself. That doesn't mean it was the only kind of learning she did. Reading aloud, audiobooks, those were both very important because it gave her exposure to advanced language skills, which helped with improving her ability to listen and understand language. I think if we were to sum up what we really want from education, it would be to spread a rich feast of education. It's not a good idea to do only one thing. So if your child seems like a visual learner, you don't want to just use visual learning, because then they're going to get really good at visuals and not strengthen their weaker areas. And we need to use those strengths to strengthen the weaker areas. Otherwise, we're going to end up really out of balance. Hold on, I want to make sure I read this question because that looks good. Yes, children with hyperlexia can decode words beautifully, but often struggle to understand the meaning behind them. How can this be intervened within a classroom setting where a teacher has mixed ability group of learners to meet their cognitive needs? How can their esteem be realized? I mean, are there any intervention strategies to be used to enable them realize their self-esteem? Yes. Now, you can't build someone's self-esteem, because it comes from the self. But there are things that we can do to support our hyperlexic and dyslexic learners, and I will give you some very specific examples. Let's start with hyperlexia. Hyperlexia and dyslexia both usually involve weaknesses in working memory. That's why if you try teaching a dyslexic to read, and sometimes they will forget what words are, even though they just read it. Sometimes it feels like teaching someone with dementia how to read because they can't seem to remember. Not all dyslexics, but a lot of them. With our hyperlexics, you can give them an instruction or read them a story, and they have no idea what you said. Sometimes they remember parts of it, or they get it confused, but it's not right. And it makes them look like they're not very bright, but in reality, they're very bright. They just can't remember. So both issues can be rooted in memory. Dyslexia is a little more complicated, and there definitely are some complications to hyperlexia, but that working memory component is a very important part of both. So one of the things that we can do to help our hyperlexics, and before we're able to really help them remediate this working memory weakness, one of the things we can do is when we are reading a book, sometimes if there's a movie, I'll have them watch the movie and then read the book, because then it gives them the pictures they need in their mind, because that's what hyperlexics have trouble with. They don't make a movie in their mind of what they hear. I've often heard people say, I've read the book and then I saw the movie, and they go, that's not how I pictured it. And a lot of us make a movie in our mind of what we're hearing. And if you're not making that movie, how do you remember the story? Because you can't hold all of those words in your mind at one time. A picture's worth 1,000 words. If you make a movie in your mind, that accounts for a ton of words. So it's a much easier way to store that verbal information. It's more efficient. So a lot of hyperlexics do not have that ability, or if they do, it's a little bit not right. Like, you might have a kid who imagines a story taking place in modern day Tanzania, and turns out the story is actually in Victorian England. Not the same at all. And so that creates a problem with their movie, because if their movie's wrong, then they're not going to understand the story correctly. Kind of like if you have a really sad story and they imagine the movie to be bright and sunshiny with rainbows and it's very happy, but it's a sad story. So there's some problems with the way they make their movies, or they don't make a movie at all. But giving them a movie or a picture book or something with imagery before they read the story to help prepare them really does help. Eventually, what we want them to do is to teach them to make movies in their minds. And I do have more information on this that I could get y'all access to. It's being able to make that movie, and it's teaching someone to be the director of the movie in their mind. You know, what's the mood? What's the background like? What's the setting? Where are we? And then also, with dyslexia, we also have a working memory issue. And this is particularly obvious in English. If you lived in Spain, Italy, Israel, you're not going to have this problem, because in those languages, words are spelled the way they sound. In English, it's not. So one of the biggest issues that I see in the United States with dyslexia is working memory, because in order to spell a word, you have to be able to see it, because you can't go through all of the rules of decoding and fluently read at the same time. You have to remember. And so in order to do that, we need to visualize the word in our mind. So for me, I'm dyslexic, and this is the area that I have the most trouble with. I've gotten better, but it's still not great. So when I imagine a word in my mind, I see light white chalk on a light gray chalkboard, and someone's erasing it as we go, because I can only hold about 5, maybe 6 letters at a time. So if I spell a word out loud now as an adult, I will spell about 5 letters, and then I will pause and write the word out in my head until I get to the next letters, and then I'll say those letters, and then I'll pause and rewrite the word again in my head, because I'm only getting 5 letters at a time, until I finally get through the word, write the word down. So working memory can be incredibly important for both. With dyslexic children, it's much easier to support them, because we're not dealing with a comprehension problem or memory that involves comprehension. We're dealing with decoding issues. Have somebody read the book aloud, or read the lesson aloud, or use a video. There are so many different ways that we can access. There are pens that read to you. There's screen readers. There's so many different options now. There's free audiobooks online. LibriVox.org. I think it's org. LibriVox.org, I think. They have tons of free audiobooks online, including in multiple languages. There are so many options available to make learning accessible to dyslexics. Does it mean that we should focus completely on their strengths and ignore their weaknesses? No. We should definitely continue working on strengthening those weak areas. And sometimes we can use a strength to help strengthen a weak area. Like if you're trying to learn sight words, one really easy way to do that for a dyslexic is to turn it into a picture. So if it was the word look, okay, I might make the 2 O's eyeballs. So that way when I see the word look, I think about the 2 eyeballs, and then I can remember. Because dyslexics are really good at remembering pictures and stories. They're not good at remembering letters and numbers. So I also had trouble learning my math facts when I was a kid. So One example is I could not remember 8 times 8. It's 64. So how I taught myself this was I thought, okay, 8 and 8, they're made up of 4 circles. There are 4 Beatles, like from the band, John, Paul, Ringo, George, etc. And they sang a song called When I'm 64. And that's how I remember 8 times 8 is 64, which sounds like a ridiculously difficult way to remember 8 times 8 is 64. But if you can't remember 8 times 8 is 64, but you can remember, hey, the 4 Beatles sang a song called When I'm 64, then it's easier. If that's what you can remember, then that's the easiest way to do it. So that's how we can use our strengths to be able to do things that we can't do. Now, ideally, it'd be great if we could learn how to see letters and numbers in our head more clearly. And we definitely, I use a program where we teach kids to visualize the letters, like how they are formed, changing the texture, changing the color, and then that expands out to words so that they become stronger at spelling. My daughter was our guinea pig when we created that program, and she improved 3 grade levels in spelling in 3 months. So it makes a huge difference. My son was our guinea pig when we did the one for hyperlexics, and he improved 5 grade levels in listening comprehension in 1 year. And it completely changed his behavior, because when you can't understand what's going on around you, then a lot of times we get a lot of behavior problems because the kids are frustrated because they don't understand. Dyslexics, usually that's not as big of an issue. Their understanding's great. It's just being able to remember letters, numbers, details, a list. They're great at pictures, comprehension, that kind of thing. So, any rate, those are the 2 main areas that I see with dyslexia and hyperlexia. There are ways to help each other and support each other, like my children did, one of them reading, one of them narrating back what they read. You can also work to strengthen those weaker processing areas. There are many tools available to us. No matter where you are, there are tools available. Whether you're reading aloud or using a storytelling method, or you create some number family story to remember math facts, there are so many different options out there today. I tell people all the time, this is the best time to be dyslexic. When I was a kid, if you got if you had dyslexia and you wanted an audiobook, you paid a lot of money and you got almost a backpack full of tapes, and you couldn't get an audiobook for every book you wanted to read. I didn't read as many books when I was a kid because it wasn't accessible. But today, I mean, there are audiobooks on our phones at the click of a button. And there's even free audiobooks that you can download offline to an MP3 player or some other CD or device. There are so many ways of making things more accessible these days. Some of the most recent technologies that have come out, they've come out with pens that read to you. If you go onto Chrome, then you can get an app for it that will read the screen to you. There are so many options out there. Some of them free, some of them not. But this is really the best time to be dyslexic. And quite honestly, if I had my choice between hyperlexia and dyslexia, I would choose dyslexia every time, because dyslexia does not block you from meeting your cognitive needs. Hyperlexia, because of those memory problems, it can block you from advanced learning, from meeting those cognitive needs. You might be able to read it, but if you can't understand it, what's the point? So, but both can be supported. And I think it's important to remember that learning and processing is kind of like a spectrum. You got some people who are extremely dyslexic, some people who are extremely hyperlexic, most of the people in the middle, and some people all over the place in between. And any kind of processing is like that. So what we need to do is use our more extreme strengths to compensate for our areas that are weaker, so that we can find some balance and just make learning easier for everybody. I am going to stop there because I wanted to make sure that I left a little bit of time in case y'all have questions. And it's lovely getting to be with you guys.
Thank you so much. You can see the flowers. You did such a good job, Amy.
Thank you.
We're grateful you spared your time to just be with us and share your knowledge. I have learned quite a lot. You should see what I've written down. And I loved the fact that you're saying this is the best time to be dyslexic. Oh my goodness.
It
And
really is, and it's something worth being proud of too, because there are a lot of good things that come with being dyslexic.
And you know what, Amy? For me, I've always thought being hyperlexic is always better because you learn first. Little did I know, it blocks you from meeting cognitive needs. Oh my.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
You're
And
most welcome.
and something that really caught me unawares is the fact that you said um, we give people the gift of time. I mean, let's be patient with them. They will learn at their own time. Who said one must learn at a specific age? We are learning and we are adults. So the gift
Mm-hmm.
of time really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I cannot thank you enough. I want to open the floor for
Please do.
someone who would like to say something or ask a question. Members, you're welcome to ask a question or add something. You can raise your hand or you can unmute and speak. I know
Okay,
Professor Ziegler left already. He excused himself. Welcome.
okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Richard.
Yes, my name is Richard Arun Malongo. I'm student of speech and language pathology from Muhimbili University, based in Tanzania. My question goes to the presenter who has been presenting very well. I've got new things, regarding dyslexia, but I would like to ask a question like, according to her experience being neurodivergent adultery, having two children also who are neurodivergent, I would like to ask the question that's what are areas that's what are areas of dyslexia management that still needs a lot of research uh, regarding to the low middle income countries, which are this field still new, and so as to improve the outcome for our children who are hyperexic or having dyslexia. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I would say that the area that needs more research is the area related to working memory. There are research studies in the United States, but a lot of them are proprietary because they were done by a company that created a program that they sell for money. So the research was proprietary. There is some research that's been done that's non-proprietary, but there really hasn't been as much focus on the working memory component. And it's something that's really easy to address and support. I didn't even learn about it in graduate school at all. Nobody mentioned it. I didn't learn about hyperlexia until I had a son who was hyperlexic. And then I was like, something's going on. I got to figure this out. Because none of his therapists understood what was going on. So I think that that's an area that really needs a lot more study just to make it more accessible to more people. The programs that my kids originally started with were very expensive. They were $550 of US dollars each, and their training was $1,000. So I contacted the company and asked them, would you make a home version? And they said no. So I made my own version, and it's much cheaper. So, we've got to make supporting kids with working memory weaknesses more accessible. And we do that by adding to the research base and by creating more options that can be used in low-income countries especially. The programs we ended up creating, compared to the $1,500 of the other program in US dollars, it's only $25. And it also is, it's using stuff someone might have around their house. And it's all game-based, so you can adjust the games based on where you are. So we made it that way on purpose because we needed something that would be accessible to people in a variety of settings and locations. So that's one thing that we've done, but there should be more research out there that's not proprietary so that more people have access to it.
Wow. Thank you for the difference you make, Amy. Richard, is your question answered?
Yes, I would like to thank Amy for the for the good response that I've get from her, and I'm sure that's how I will go and find I'll go and find out the way that I can get access to that what you mentioned.
Yes, it's called the dual coding theory. That's what you'll want to search. I think we have another hand up. Justin, maybe.
Yes, Justin, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good evening for those who in our region. According to the presentation, I want to know one thing from Amy. When in my profession as a teacher, I'm teaching English language. English language as a foreign language, from young to adults. Now, take into consideration children with that memory problem, especially as a foreign language. What has been done to help such kind of children to learn new language in their sense of problem? Thank you.
That's a great question, and I gotta say, I very much respect what you're doing because I have said many times I am so glad that my first language was English because I can't imagine having to learn it as a second language as a dyslexic. So it's definitely an area that is difficult. Actually, when I meet with families and talk about second languages for them to choose. In the United States, our first language is English, so our second language is not going to be English. And we have a little bit more choice because, you know, a lot of the world speaks English, so we can choose a different second language. So when it comes to choosing a second language, which isn't going to help you exactly, but it might help explain it, I often recommend families consider learning Hebrew. And the reason is it uses a completely different alphabet. So you can't get confused about what sound the letter makes. Because I took French and Spanish, it was a disaster because I couldn't remember which sound the letter made in which language because they all used the same alphabet roughly. So that was a problem. The other thing about Hebrew is that every letter has one sound. And it's spelled the way it sounds. And then the third thing is that it goes in the opposite direction. So it kind of helps your brain shift, but none of that will help you with teaching English as a second language. But I thought I'd throw that out as an example of just how difficult it is. One of the best things you can do is try to strengthen their working memory before really starting on English. Another thing you can do is using multisensory approaches. So not only are we strengthening the working memory of being able to imagine and see letters in our minds, but we might be tracing a letter in the dirt. We might be making it out of clay. We might be closing our eyes and trying to figure out what someone else has drawn or created, like what letter they have created. Any kind of strengthening of visualizing letters and paying attention to how they are formed and using a multisensory approach will help. When it comes to sight words, like I mentioned before, if you can turn the word into a picture that describes the meaning, that can be helpful. So there are some things that we can do, but English is not easy. And I would say that the best thing you can do is to strengthen that working memory. It doesn't take long. When my daughter was using our program, she did 15 minutes a day, 1 or 2 days a week. And within 3 months, she had improved 3 grade levels in spelling. That's huge. It didn't take long.
Amy, I want to ask you a question. It's related to the solution you found for your children. Is it open for other people and you sell it? You missed something.
Oh, the program that we ended up making because of the other programs that were too expensive, right?
Yes.
Yes, I have them on my website. And as a PDF, they are, I think, only $25 each. One is, they're on my website. You go to Boost because it's to boost your educational skills. They have a rocket on them. And the dyslexia one is yellow, and the green one is hyperlexia. And I color code my books because I'm dyslexic and I can't remember the titles I chose for my books. So that's another way of accommodating for dyslexic children is by color coding things. Actually, we color code our toothbrushes because my husband decided it would be really funny for us to have the same color. And I ended up getting confused and kept using his toothbrush because I couldn't remember which one was mine, and he had to write my name on it. So, and when I was in college, I color coded my books because I would get to the wrong class with the wrong books because I wasn't paying attention to the words. So all of my math books were blue. All of my science books were purple. And that included like my notebooks, and I had a pencil bag in each notebook because I would forget a pencil too. So like there are ways of using color coding. When my kids were small, I color coded my kids. Everything of my daughters was red or pink, and everything of my sons was blue because I could remember, okay, blue's the boy, pink's the girl. So there's lots of different ways of, supporting weak working memory.
Wow, you're just amazing, Amy. I would
Thank
like
you.
you to share your website so that
Yes.
people who are attending here can be able to access. They can be able to access the items, the material that you've. Yes, there you go.
Yes, it's amybodkin.com. It's just my name. And if you look at the website, go to Boost. And we've tried to keep our resources as inexpensive as possible because worldwide there's differences in economies. The one-on-one supports, those are more expensive, but any of our written ones we try to keep inexpensive as much as we can. We've also got an online conference coming up where we will be having a variety of specialists speaking. It's called Supporting High Needs Learners at Home. Let me see if I can get you that link too. You can get to it from the website. I just can't remember. Let's see. Okay, I've gotten closer. I'll have to find it later and send it to you.
Don't worry.
It's here somewhere. Yeah.
I will share it with them because we have a support group of more than 520 people. So I'm sure I've posted that if you're not in our support group, just inbox me on that number and I can add you. And I always share important details on the support group.
The conference we're doing runs $15 United States dollars, but I have scholarships available. So if anyone needs a scholarship, let me know. I have a limited number, but I have some, so let me know. And it also includes about $100 in freebies, like free things, gifts. So,
Wow.
and you get access to the recordings for life. So if it's in the middle of your night, it's okay. You can still listen to them whenever you want. So that's a little bit about it.
You're so kind. I will also announce about your conference in our support group so that we get more people attending. And
I love that.
We will appreciate the scholarship. I'm sure there are parents who would love to attend and they might not have the budget.
Yes, please let me know. If it's a parent who doesn't have the budget, we will do what we can. So I've got some families. Yeah, I've already got some people, and yes, Justin, contact me through the website. It's probably the best way. I've got some people already joining from Kenya, some in Canada, the United States. So we're definitely looking at a worldwide event. So I'm loving that. So.
And you have someone on the platform saying, can I be appointed for scholarship? And I wish he can get, because he attended the session faithfully and contributed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Justin, send me a message. If you go to my website, it'll give you the option to send me a message and I will send you the coupon code.
Thank you so
not a
much,
problem.
people. Amy, you've been amazing this evening again. I'm sure we would love to hear more from you. It's already 7 minutes past and it feels like we just started our session. You're such
That's because we had so much fun.
Thank you so much. And team, if you have any questions, I have a number for Amy, and she's already shared her website anyway. But if you need help, just let me know. I can connect you to Amy. Thank you so much. I am so grateful. That was an insightful session. I learned quite a bit.
I'm so glad.
Good evening, everyone.
All right. I'll look forward to hearing from y'all again.
Thank
you for having me.
Thank you.